Good morning. My name is Bob Schaefer. I am Vice President of East Coast Sales for PointRoll. And today's panel, we understand it is one of the last that's sitting between you guys and lunch. So we'll try to keep it fluid, keep it open, and also keep it interactive. And today's panel is, as you can see, it's around data-driven digital advertising. And I think from a lot of the presentation we've already seen today that there are lots of very scientific ways of getting to the right consumer and targeting them. But then what happens? And we want to sort of talk about the other side of that. And the other side of that is action via engagement and what that means. What are we going to get users to do with the creative to get an ultimate KPI or result? And with that, I wanted to introduce our panel. I'd like everybody to sort of introduce themselves and also give an example of how they feel or what they've seen in the marketplace for clients that they think is a good description of dynamic in their mind. So with that.
Hey everybody, I'm Maria McHugo. I'm a senior digital producer. I've been in the advertising field probably about 13 years now. Started off on the production side at a production house and then ended up in advertising. So I'm happy to be here.
Hi, I'm Jason Lord. I'm the Senior Director of Technical Sales at PointRoll. I work to help explain complex concepts to the clients that we work with. To answer your question about what's an example of how dynamic impacts the marketplace, I think for a long time, creative and media have been natural enemies of each other. And I think data-driven advertising is the slow dance that's going to bring them together. The implications for the media side are obvious. It's more efficient, more targeted. But on the creative side, you get to retain a vision and at the same time have a conversation with your audience. The audience is informing you what's working and not working against a different placement, against a different point in the purchase funnel, against a different audience, so that you can design a template to work with and have the individual elements rotate out on a programmatic way, which is very exciting. It means that no longer you're testing based on money, but you're testing based on what your audience is telling you in real time.
Great, thanks. My name is Chelsea Rich. I'm a vice president at Digitas LBI in the strategy and analysis group. I've been at Digitas LBI for about 2 years, and since I've been there, I've kind of focused on data-driven strategies for different brands. I'm also one of the leads in what we call Brand Live, which is our real-time marketing platform. And I think that that's a really good answer to the question that was asked by Bob. So what we do with Brand Live is we take insights on a daily basis, transform them into good creative ideas that could be distributed in real time via social, via different campaigns, being able to swap in different media. So really taking those insights on that data on a daily basis and being able to swap them in real time. So I think that's another definition of how data can form dynamic creative.
And I'm Eric Keating, Director of Marketing at Compete, which is now Millward Brown Digital. My perspective here comes from working with top advertisers and agencies around the world, developing advertising effectiveness solutions for them. An example of a way that I think our clients are using data to tailor their creative and advertising is identifying which stage of the funnel certain prospects are at and delivering creative that's tailored for that stage of the funnel and moving them to the next.
So we've covered a couple of examples of what we think it looks like. Is there anyone from the panel who wants to talk about maybe what a client's done specifically to sort of add some grit or reality to what dynamic is? Jason, want to talk a little bit about?
Sure, absolutely. So a lot of times we make an assumption about who we're trying to appeal to. And one of the promises of data-driven advertising is it's going to tell us things that we could never make a best guess about. And there's a sneaker company, for instance, who assumed that the target audience for their sneaker was males between the ages of 18 and 35. So they ran a campaign against it, and then they ran audience analytics against it, and they found out that they were actually converting a lot of women that they didn't know were interested in their product. So they made a targeted buy against those women they were appealing to, and their KPI shot up, their conversion rate shot up almost 400%. They would have never known that had they not used the data to inform the way that they're making their purchases. And I think that's a very exciting promise.
Any other examples from the panel?
Sure, yeah. The platform that I just mentioned with Brand Live, we work with Sprint. And recently at the CES conference in Las Vegas, they wanted to use that platform to be able to tap into what consumers are saying at the actual conference to be able to then inform what they're going to put out in social platforms. And so what the team did there was they listened to a bunch of different topics that they were interested in being able to promote that not only cross both the consumer interest but also the brand interest. So they took a look at those topics, found the consumer chatter and the insights that were interesting, understood what was trending, and then what they did, they passed on those insights to the creative team, and that then informed what they put out in social, whether that was a video, an image, dynamic, anything like that they put out into the creative. And it was really successful, lots of impressions, lots of engagement, very successful platform for Brand Live.
And we also actually, at Jack Morton, completed a project with the Born This Way Foundation, which is Lady Gaga's foundation, with her mom, Cynthia Germanata, it was January through March, because unfortunately she had to end up canceling the tour. But it was essentially a rolling tour bus and an experience where youth could come in, they would register, then we'd sort of guide them through the path of maybe a food and beverage tent, and then they would see certain content on kiosks and they would interact with it. And then they would move forward to additional tents, and they would see similar kiosks that they saw sort of throughout the process of the experience, and we were sort of guiding them through, and we were collecting data and trying to figure out which information they were more interested in. So then we would go back into the office and say, listen, these are the specific things this youth is interested in. At the end of the actual event, they would have to take a survey. So they'd take the survey, they'd enter all their information, and we'd collect all of that data and then quickly turn around and just tweak and optimize the experience, because we knew that there was a specific focus. However, once we were sort of going about the project and the process and throughout the entire event, we'd learn more information that we were then able to optimize and tweak along the tour route, which was even more helpful for each additional event.
So the benchmark constantly changing and upgrading.
Constantly improving, not necessarily specifically changing, but I think just being optimized along the way, because it was pretty successful.
Yeah. So we've talked about defining it, and then we've talked about examples. Why is this important? I feel like that there's like we talked about earlier, there's a ton of focus on efficiency on the media side, driving efficiency and making sure that the right audiences are met in the right progression at the right reach. But then there's the other side of it, right? There's the creative side of it as well. So can we talk a little bit about like why this is important beyond just the media piece?
So I can't speak too much to creative myself, but I will say that there's another aspect, which is your prospect or your customer's experience. Making sure that you're hitting them with the right message at the right time is not just about your advertising being effective. It's also about their experience being a pleasant one and not being bombarded with irrelevant messaging.
But I also think that goes to the creative, because that is going to inform how the creative is generated, what the idea is, what the insights are that are going to go into it. That will create that personalized, customized experience for the client that will take them from brand building down the funnel to potentially purchase. So it's all kind of combined. You can't separate one from the other, and I think that's the beauty of data-driven advertising, is that it does kind of touch every point of the entire process.
Yeah.
Here's another reason it's really important. Let's say you're an auto manufacturer, and you have a line of vehicles, and you have a number of different Tier 3 distributors all throughout the country. So each distributor has a different promotional message. It's a different vehicle, a different background, because you're not going to show snow in Texas. You're not going to show cactus in North Dakota. That means that you may have up to 10,000 iterations of a single ad. Now, if you're a creative agency, that means you have to employ people whose job it is to turn out every single one of those and traffic each of those. With data-driven advertising, you can have a shell of a creative, And you can rotate in different promotional messages depending on the geography, depending on the demographic, depending on the placement. But also, you can learn against those. So you can find out this call to action is performing very well. So we're going to start to do this more. And it happens on a programmatic level. So you don't have to have an individual who's combing through the data to understand this. You're simply having a creative whose job is to oversee the brand standard of the ad and having everything else happen behind the scenes. That means as a creative agency, you get to focus on the most important thing, which is how to be impactful. As a media company, you get to be more efficient. And as a brand, you don't have to employ 20,000 people to do a job that can be much simpler than that.
And I get asked this question all the time, but it's really from a sales perspective. But where's the growth? Do we see growth? Do you have an idea of how many clients have either done it this year? How many are now talking about it for next year? Is this something that we're going to see more and more of? I would hope.
I think they're all talking about it. I think you can't not talk about it. You can't ignore it. It's something that every client, at least that we're working with right now, is very interested in because they want to measure. They want to make sure that they're getting results based on whatever project that we're working on and whatever product we're providing to them, whether it be a broadcast spot, whether it be a website or a banner ad. I think, to your point, I mean, it's testing. Test something. If something doesn't work, then change it. Obviously, there are a lot of logistics involved in making sure that you're able to do that, but you're communicating with your client. You're making sure that they understand that this might not work, and if it doesn't work, then we'll tweak it, and we'll fix it and make it work.
I mean, there's a ton of growth just in the sense that there are new data sources every day. There are new platforms every day, new types of advertising every day. So, not only are our clients getting more interested in it, but there's so much more room to grow for technology and measurement to begin with.
Yeah. A question for Chelsea. Do you have advice that you can share for brands that are considering data-driven advertising?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think the first thing is to kind of look inside your organization and understand where you fall within the spectrum of data and technology. So it's that initial assessment that's the most important part. You can't leap from point A to point Z right away. You've got to understand what data you have in-house from first-party data. What are you collecting from your customers? Do you have an organized database today? Do you have the technology to be able to actually use the data, segment the population that's in there, understand what's going on with your customer base, and then what kind of third-party data do you have? What are you buying? What are you getting from social properties? Are you listening to your consumers? And can you marry all of that together? So where you fall in the spectrum of that is going to help develop your own roadmap and your own strategy to getting where you want to go. And then you, of course, have to overlay that with your campaign goals. Are you trying to build your brand? Are you trying to get people down the purchase funnel? All of those will go into how you develop your data-driven strategy. So essentially, wherever that is, that's where you are in your roadmap, and you can kind of go from there.
I'll add one more thing to that, which is that when you're finding a partner to work with in Dynamic, don't trust anybody who says you can do it on your own. Dynamic is an incredibly complex subject.
Yeah. And
you need to make sure that you're working with experts who are going to help you make your campaign goals match the campaign strategy.
Yeah. And I think that's a really good point about owning it yourself versus outsourcing it. And the decision there is really about how ready your culture is as an organization to be able to take that in-house versus outsourcing it. It takes a big shift culturally to be able to do real time, to be able to use data to on your own before something successful happens. So using the third parties at the very beginning, at least, is an important part of your strategy.
Hey, Maria, can you talk about the challenges for brands that want to marry data and creative? And there's pitfalls to this.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, I think ideally data can either enhance or compete with creative, and a lot of times I work with amazing creatives that are really, really creative and have these pie-in-the-sky ideas, and data has to be there, and data comes in, and you have to explain to them, all right, well, data is the data. This is what the people want. This is what the people are looking for. And so it's sort of a fine line that you have to walk with your creative team. So I think there's a couple of things that from a production standpoint I really have to keep in mind when working with sort of my strategy team, who's providing me with the data and the information, and then obviously my creative team as well. So I think one of the things is the talent. So making sure I have the right teams in place that are open to understanding, okay, again, here's this information, here is how this could work creatively. Again, it is a fine line because you don't want to insult the creative that you're working on by saying, well, this is what everyone wants because these are the numbers and this is the data that we're given. So that creative has to be open and willing to modifying their wonderful idea because of the information that we're actually getting from them. Another thing is timeline. So for me, I'm a producer. I care about timelines. I care about schedules. I care about making sure that my clients are getting things that they need and when they need them. However, with that said, we keep talking about maybe optimizing creative and making sure that we're tweaking things along the way. So as a project manager and producer, I have to make sure I have the budget to cover those optimizations and those enhancements. Because at the end of the day, I don't want to go back to my client 5 times and say, well, we didn't really think this through in the beginning, and I'm going to have to hit you with a change request because we didn't have the money to scope it out originally. So I think for me, that's really most important. And again, it is the testing that I spoke about. If something's not working, well, why not change a graphic? If someone's clicking on a website and they're going to a certain area but ignoring another, or if there's a button that they're missing and it has a specific call to action, well, let's change it. Maybe it's a learn more. Maybe it's win here, whatever it may be. I think we just have to be open to actually changing and optimizing the creative. I know I keep saying that, but it really is true. So I have to make sure that I have the budget to do that as well. And lastly, really, it's preserving the creative integrity. I mean, again, it's going back to that creative person that I want to work with, and I want to make sure that that person's working with my strategist and looking at all of the numbers and giving the client what they want. But, not discouraging them from coming up with a bigger, better idea, because that's what they're there for.
So protecting creative egos, protecting creative dollars, and protecting creative integrity.
That's what we do.
Is there, but back to your first point about working with a strategy team, working with a creative team. Mm-hmm. Are they at the table together?
Yes.
With you in the middle, maybe mediating, yes, or giving and taking, or?
So that's a good question. I mean, it really starts from the beginning. As a producer, I'm making sure that all of the parties are involved, all of the parties are talking to one another, so there are no pitfalls. So, my strategist doesn't go off and strategize a totally, ridiculous point to then come back to my creative team and expect them to accomplish without having that conversation. I would never have a designer design something without, if it's for the web, if it's for print, but without going to a developer or a creative director who's more closely related to print to make sure that whatever we're concepting and we're creating is actually doable, because we all know 95 or 99% of the time most creative online is doable, but you want to make sure that all of the teams are constantly working together, checking in, making sure that we're accomplishing not only the creative vision but the client's vision and hopefully the end user's vision too.
And that also doesn't count the vendor, because somewhere in there's probably a third-party technology vendor that you're at least relying on a resource or a technology in order to drive what strategy is asking for and what creative is building. Right?
Absolutely. And I mean, it's a conversation. It's just a constant conversation. It's a constant check-in. And again, as a producer, that's my main job, just to make sure that everyone is talking to one another, everyone's listening to one another, so that the creative isn't going to be upset when the strategist says, look, the Google Analytics tells me this. This is where your audience is going. This is how you need to change your creative to adapt and to make sure that they're going to other areas that the client really wants them to focus on.
Yeah. I want to ask Eric a question. So we've sort of talked about where at least in the creative process, the data-driven, we talked about where in the creative process it sits from the data-driven ad side, but how about audience? Like, Is it as developed as it should be at this point? Are you, whether it's the audience piece or it's the retargeting piece, like do you guys have enough data? Because I always feel like this ties back to KPIs, right? And I'd be curious,
Yeah.
Are you seeing enough up front?
I mean, so enough. Yeah, I think there's a hell of a lot of data out there, and a lot of people don't know how to use it yet. So that's the biggest challenge. So I don't know if enough is really, there's maybe too much right now. But I don't think there's everything we'll see. I think there's a hell of a lot more data to come out in the future. There are more advanced ways that we can use it, more ways that we can understand it, and then once we do understand it, we'll be dealing with entire new metrics to focus on. One of the things we're really excited about is we've been calling it cost per impact. And everybody's used to reach and frequency metrics, but what about shifting your audience's behavior or shifting your audience's, this is a step in the funnel that they're at, maybe getting them aware of your brand or moving them into the purchase intent part. And that's been really hard to measure. But when you're using things like browsing behavior, clickstream data, sending surveys to your audience after they've seen an ad, you can really get a sense for how you impacted them and then attach a cost to that. So, for example, we have test groups that we use. So we'll look at a group of people who have visited site A and saw the ad, and a group of people who visited site A and did not see the ad. And then we'll look at their behavior afterward, and we'll send a survey to them and ask them some questions about their brand perception, or is there any more intent to buy? And then we'll understand what impact that ad had. And then you can slice it by what impact that ad had on a certain demographic, or what impact that ad had depending on what site the ad was on. So it introduces this whole new kind of efficiency metric that you can focus on. And that's just one metric. I'm sure there are many more to come.
So, and I wanted to open this up to the panel because from a technology standpoint, we keep using this word because this is the one that sits in the middle. It sits between creative and it sits between media. And, between DSPs and third-party data providers, first-party data, DMPs, ad servers, audience measurement providers. There's a lot of ad technology that gets baked into these. And I guess I'm curious, how is it working? Are they delivering what they should be? Are they, is the technology, is it working? I feel like that when we see, a lot of times, we won't know creative is doing what it's doing just by viewing it. There's a lot of stuff that happens in the back end that makes things magically appear, which is fantastic. But I'm curious, is the ad tech space delivering and sort of bridging the gap between data and media? And
so once upon a time, the brands would throw anybody with the name digital in their title on a project having to do with digital advertising. And those brands were responsible, that team was responsible for ensuring the campaign strategy throughout the process, taking in the data, making sense of it, saying here's what we're going to do as a result of it. A lot of that got offloaded to groups like media and creative agencies who further offloaded to all the technologies that you're talking about, DSPs, audience segments. The problem with that is that each of these groups now has a small window of insight into what's happening with the campaign. And of course, they're all operating out of self-interest as well. They're going to tell you, yes, we did what we did really well, so you should continue to run with us. The problem is now there's few groups who have insight into the holistic strategy, who can make sense of that data and say, based on that data, here's what we recommend. Your KPI was not right from the start, actually. Or you should be thinking about this in terms of creative, because, again, they can only talk about their individual elements. So I think that's the things that brands have to be very protective of, is making sure either themselves or they're partnering up with a group whose goal it is to have a holistic end-to-end campaign strategy, including measuring the data and making sense of the data.
any other points on that?
I'll just bring back the point. It's really not about, to me, it's not about whether the technology is delivering the solutions or the data. It's really about, the more important piece to focus on is how you use it. There's too much out there. So find out what's important to you, find out which tools and providers are going to give you the data that you need, and then figure out how to use that data efficiently. Just having data in-house doesn't do anything for you. You need to understand it, pull out insights, and then make decisions based on those insights.
Cool. We wanted to at least take this time to open it up to the floor for questions. Does anybody have questions about the data-driven topic today?
I think everybody's hungry.
I think everybody's hungry. Yeah. I have one last one. For 2014, when should conversations start happening about dynamic?
Yesterday?
2 months ago.
Right?
It's always too late.
I mean, it is and it isn't. It's always important to be looking forward, but the more important thing is to understand how everyone has data. It's making sense of that data. So as soon as you can start to dig into that data and work with people who can understand that data, the better off you are. I would say that you should at the very least be planning for the holiday season now, but you should be planning for Q1 based on previous Q1 data. And if you don't have any learnings, that's fine. You need to start somewhere. The point is start as soon as possible.
Right, and it's also about the here and now, too, because there is the future, and as you said, that could always, who knows, things could change, and 6 months from now, we could be talking about something totally different. I don't think we will be, but it's also about the here and now and making sure, to everyone's point, everyone's gathering the information. You have people and teams in your business that understand how to use that data and then get your client what they're looking for, and that's results, and that's people buying their products. Yeah. So.
I also think that there's a little bit of a shift away from is it 2013 versus 2014? I think we're shifting towards more real-time creative, always on, and so we're kind of getting away a little bit from the campaign, unless the campaign isn't always on campaign. So getting rid of the 2013 versus 2014 and really getting into what are we trying to achieve and how can we always be relevant to our clients, I think that's the most important thing to think about versus timeframes.
Completely agree. We're hearing we want to optimize and change our campaigns in flight all the time. I mean, we don't want to wait for the campaign to end to know the results. We want to know them now, make shifts in the campaign before it ends, and get the most bang for our buck.
Any advice for talking to creatives about data-driven strategies and involving them in the process?
Give them gifts.
Be gentle. But it is true because, I think my point earlier, everybody understands that we need to change and optimize, but I think for creatives, they have their idea and they know what they want to do, but at the end of the day, if it's not going to sell, it's not going to work. So,
plus, as a creative, I'm always interested in knowing what's working, not working, and I don't usually get that feedback until the end of a campaign. Yeah. This gives me a chance to have a conversation mid-campaign, which is very exciting to me as a creative person.
Yeah. Yep.
And I also, just as much as I was talking about earlier, that it's a cultural shift for your clients, it's also a cultural shift for your creative team as well as your data strategy teams. That constant communication, that type of day-to-day activity to be able to optimize the campaigns, that is new, it's fresh, it's hard to do, and it's a hard shift for everybody to make, and you just have to start with the baby steps to get there.
Yeah.
Thank you guys so much.
Thanks.
Thank
you.
all.
Thanks.